If you've been on social media lately, you already know protein is everywhere. You got protein chips, protein ice cream, protein coffee. Everyone's telling you to eat more of it, but nobody's actually explaining how much do you really need? Not the marketing number, not the bro science number, but the evidence-based number, based on who you actually are and what you're actually trying to do. Today, we're going to cut through all of that and help you understand how much you actually need. By the end of this video, you'll know your actual protein target, why the old guidelines are wrong, and one thing that matters even more than protein quantity. So let's get into that. So let's start with the number most people have heard, which is 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. That's the RDA, which stands for Recommended Dietary Allowance. And for decades, that's been the number. And here's the problem. The RDA is a 70-year-old metric. It was built from nitrogen balance studies. And it was designed to do one thing, prevent deficiency. So it's kind of the floor. It's the bottom where you would want to be. It's not ideal. It's the minimum. It was never designed to help you build muscle, preserve lean mass as you age, or support fat loss. Eating 0.8 grams per kilogram is like putting the bare minimum amount of gas in your car and calling it a full tank. I love this visual because it makes it immediately clear. The RDA of 0.8 grams per kilo is the foundation. It holds the house up. It keeps the structure from collapsing, but the house itself, the actual building, part you live in, that's optimal intake. That's the 1.2 to 2 grams per kilogram range where you're actually building something. So that's muscle, that's metabolic health, that's longevity. The foundation and the house are not the same thing. And a lot of people have been confusing the two. Now here's where it gets interesting and timely. In January of 2026, the US dietary guidelines dropped. This is the first time where they actually made an increase in protein recommendations. So shifting from the old 0.8 grams per kilogram floor to a 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram. That's nearly double the old number. And the reason for that is the science has evolved. We're no longer just trying to prevent malnutrition. We're trying to promote metabolic health and muscle preservation. Now, Stanford researchers and Harvard nutrition scientists have both weighed in saying that the underlying evidence doesn't fully support this jump. And I agree. I think some of the protein hype is being driven by the industry, but the direction of the shift, I think that part is right. The old number was too low. Most active adults need more than 0.8 grams per kilogram. The question is how much more, and that depends on who you are and what goal you're trying to achieve. Think of your protein needs as a slider. Everyone starts at the same baseline, about 1.2 grams per kilogram. That's your maintenance floor for a reasonably active adult. From there, the slider moves based on what you're asking your body to do. If you're an endurance athlete, say a runner, a cyclist, someone doing a lot of cardio, your slider moves up to about 1.2 to 1.4. And the reason being is that endurance exercise actually burns some amino acids, so protein, for fuel. So you need a bit more to compensate. And then if you're doing something like strength training or power training, your slider moves higher, so about 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram. In this case, you're breaking down more muscle and you need more protein to rebuild that muscle. So protein is that raw material for that process. So yes, if you lift, you need a bit more, but not wild numbers like you might see on social media or different fitness accounts. So we talked about 1.2 being the baseline for most people, and I'll also talk about endurance athletes as well as strength and power athletes. But there's three other categories of people that also have different protein demands. And these three different categories are elderly, if you're pregnant or lactating, as well as people trying to have fat loss as a goal. So let's first talk about fat loss as a goal. There isn't really kind of a range here. You want to have at least 1.2 grams per kilogram, but from anecdotal work with clients, I find having a lot higher intake actually helps a lot just with the hunger management piece. I have a rough guideline of about 1.8 to 2.8 grams per kilogram. And some people that can be quite a bit. You want to find an amount that's practical with food, but just know that as you have a higher amount, it's just going to be easier to eat less calories because you're going to feel full and you're not going to have to struggle to try to eat less just because your brain's not going to send you hunger signals. You're going to eat a smaller amount of calories that makes you feel full. So by default, it just allows you to lose fat more sustainably long term. Then if you're a female or pregnant or lactating, the protein requirement jumps from about 1.5 to 1.9 grams per kilogram per day. And that's not a performance target, that's just a physiological demand. So you have rapid tissue growth, you have fetal development, maternal tissues are changing. The body is doing an enormous amount of building. So if you're pregnant or breastfeeding and you're still operating on the old 0.8 grams per kilogram guideline, you're generally underfueling. So this is where working with a registered dietitian can actually make a real difference. And then the last category, elderly, is another group that requires above 1.2, and I'll explain why. So as we age, something called anabolic resistance develops. At age 20, your muscles have highly sensitive receptors. By your mid-60s, these receptors have become a little bit dulled. The signal is weaker, and your muscles don't respond as readily to protein as they used to. And the graph on the screen here shows us kind of in real time. So the protein dose required to trigger muscle synthesis starts climbing steeply around age 55 to 60 roughly. What this means practically is that older adults need more protein per meal to get the same muscle building response as a younger person. So there are a lot of different ranges and different categories for different protein intakes. Here's all of them quickly summarized. So take a screenshot of this to refer back to, but don't overcomplicate it. You want to at least get the minimum in these two categories. So somewhere between 1.2, 1.4, if you're in that range, you want to get the minimum at least. And then same thing with the higher ranges, like 1.6 to 2.2. So try to get at least the minimum and you're going to be just fine. Okay, so now you know your target number, but here's something that most people get completely wrong. It's not just about hitting the total. It's about how you spread across the day. So look at the left side of this graphic. Someone eating 90 grams of protein, but dumping all of it into one dinner gets one big spike. The muscle synthesis threshold gets crossed once. The rest of the day, nothing. Now, if you look at the right-hand side, the same 90 grams is split into 3 meals of 30 grams each. The synthesis threshold gets crossed 3 times. So you're getting 3 muscle building signals throughout the day instead of 1. And the research on this is pretty clear. Distributing protein evenly across 3 to 4 meals is significantly more effective for muscle protein synthesis and therefore muscle growth than eating the same total in 1 or 2 sittings. So if you're having a protein shake at night to hit your macros, but barely eat enough protein at breakfast or lunch, this is your fix. And this is why distribution matters. Muscle protein synthesis isn't a continuous process. It's little pulses. It activates, peaks, and then resets. The reset takes roughly 3 hours. So if you eat about 120 grams of protein in one sitting, you get one big activation, and a lot of that excess protein just gets oxidized, so used for energy. But if you eat 4 doses of, say, 30 grams spread across the day, then you get 4 clean pulses of muscle protein synthesis, so that signal that triggers building muscle. 4 opportunities for your body to actually use that protein for what you want it to do. So the practical takeaway is you want to aim for about 30 to 40 grams protein per meal, 3 to 4 times a day. Before we wrap things up, let's talk about some common myths. One of the first ones I hear quite a bit is protein damages your kidneys. You've probably heard this, but the evidence doesn't suggest that. There was a meta-analysis of healthy individuals consuming up to 3.3 grams per kilogram, so way above any recommendations we've talked about so far. And they found 0 evidence of kidney damage. None. So in healthy people, the kidneys simply adapt to a higher protein load. They're remarkably good at this. Now, there is an important caveat. If you already have chronic kidney disease, high protein is a problem. So if your kidneys are healthy, high protein is definitely safe. And then myth number 2 is high protein leaches calcium from your bones and causes bone loss. This one comes from old research on urinary calcium excretion. So when you eat more protein, more calcium shows up in your urine. And someone concluded that meant bone loss as well. The problem is that that's not what the research actually shows when you look at bone density directly. Higher protein intake actually increases bone density and bone function. The calcium in the urine was actually coming from improved gut absorption, not from bones being leached. And now the most important slide in this entire video. Because everything I've told you about protein, so the targets, the distribution, the timing, it's all the frosting. Resistance training is the cake. A Stanford Medicine piece from March 2026 put it perfectly. Protein quantity matters, but it's only a thin layer of frosting on top of what actually drives muscle preservation and metabolic health. That thing is lifting. Resistance training, so strength training and progressive overload. The research is unambiguous on this. In a calorie deficit, resistance training is the only exercise modality that consistently produces fat loss without muscle loss. Aerobic exercise alone and no exercise at all both result in significant muscle loss alongside fat. You can eat 160 grams of protein a day and still lose muscle if you're not giving that protein a reason to be used. So you want to lift heavy things and build that cake. All right, so let's wrap things up here. Here's 3 things to take away from today. 1, aim for 3 to 4 distinct protein servings per day, not one big hit, 3 or 4. 2, target at least 30 grams per meal to consistently cross that muscle synthesis threshold. And lastly, 3, recalculate your needs dynamically. Your protein target isn't fixed for life. It changes with age, your activity level, your life stage, so make sure you revisit when you need to. If you want to use a free protein calculator or have someone build you a nutrition plan around your actual needs, that's exactly what we do here at Leverage Nutrition. More information about both of those will be linked in the description. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video.